Hello, my name is Jeff Neufeld, teacher number P00590, and I'm presenting my MCJ1. Now, the first question basically asks us to talk about our identity and how our identity affects how we see ourselves and the world. For me, the most important factors in my identity are the country I come from, the religion I belong to, and my parents. The fact that I'm Canadian has always promoted this kind of sense of equality. Everybody's treated the same. Everybody's thought of as Canadian. I see a person on the street, whether they're red, black, green, white, yellow, everybody assumes that that's another Canadian. So we tend to treat people the same. My religion is a small group called Mennonites. It's a small Protestant group, maybe most known for non-violence. Like, for example, during World War II, they refused to serve in the army. I can't say I'm a very strong Mennonite, but I can see how it has affected me in the sense that Mennonites encourage education a lot, these so-called soft skills as opposed to the hard skills. And here I am, a teacher, so maybe it had some effect there. My parents, my mother and father, quite different, but both of them had a strong effect on me. My mother actually ran our family. She was quite driven, quite achievement-oriented, really pushed people to do the best they can. And I think that is in me as well. And when I deal with my students, I can see that because I expect my students to do a good job. My father, more the strong, silent type. So from him, I learned a little bit about, and my mother, if you will, at the same time. You try and change things, but for my father, it was, well, and if you can't change it, well, don't worry so much about it because you can go do something else instead. So that's sort of the critical factors in my identity. If I think about how it influences how I view culture, I'm using school as an example. I think, the concept in education in Canada is this very equal idea. Even how the schools are organized, it's no PSLE. I mean, how do you go to a school? You go to the closest school. And that's, the very central idea of education. You each go to your own school. A disadvantage that I've noticed once I started traveling is that since all students are treated equal, some of the weaker students aren't doing that well and they still get pushed ahead. So we have graduates in Canada that really don't have very strong skills. On the other hand, if we look at Singapore, which is very concerned about matching people and checking their skill levels with PSLE and O levels and going to different schools where you're basically put together with other people of your own set level of skills, there's some advantages to that, I guess, in that you are all being pushed the same way. But the disadvantage, of course, is that not everybody progresses at the same rate. So if there's sort of a key point I've learned from my traveling and looking at how my culture or other cultures is that there's sort of this unconscious assumption that your own culture is always right, and I no longer automatically believe that. And certainly I agree and promote my own culture's values, but no longer do I assume that I'm always right, and no longer do I assume that others are always wrong. The second question is talking about how I compare to the other people, in my case, my teaching team. Now, our teaching team consists of, roughly half Singaporeans, half foreigners. So I'm going to sort of look at the difference between the Singaporeans and the Ang Mo. Now, in many cases, the Singaporeans tend to be more cooperative and the Ang Mo tend to be more competitive. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Of course, it can be both. Competitive typically means trying to do your best, but sometimes it might be at the expense of others. Not so much in the sense that I sabotage others, but I'm concerned how I'm doing compared to other people. The Singaporeans generally tend to be more cooperative, trying to work together to do things, but sometimes that can amount to nobody really knows who's responsible for what. I suspect you can see these same kind of ideas in your own project groups. Sometimes you have people who are only concerned about their own grade and they do their own part and they make sure it's done well. You get other people who are quite cooperative and they're all interested in sometimes just having fun together, which is okay, but doesn't necessarily get you a good group project. So these kind of things can have an impact on our life as well. Now, the third question talks about expectations about TNS and the residential stay, challenges more specifically. And I was going to talk about two challenges I face as a teacher, which is motivating students disciplining students. Now, in terms of motivating students, a lot of students seem to take TNS because of the residential stay. They're not necessarily all that interested in learning about culture. So one of the problems I have is in motivating students, especially to attend lectures. I go to any student and I ask them, if you go to lectures, will your grade go up? And they'll go, oh yeah. Unfortunately, many of them won't go. So it's quite a challenge then to motivate students to do this. And of course, it's an important skill as a teacher to be able to motivate your students. You just have to try a variety of methods. You can threaten people, you can joke with people, and otherwise encourage students to attend lectures, to attend classes, to participate in the academic as well as the residential portion in their life. That in the long run, that benefits both the students and myself in the sense that I become a better teacher and you learn something useful. I mean, we have to admit that Singapore is a multicultural environment and the skills we're talking about in this subject are really important, especially in international business. Disciplining, this is more about the residential stay itself. It's also a bit about stereotypes because every residential stay, there's always a few students who end up causing a lot of trouble. Sometimes it can be things like throwing things out the windows, eggs or water bombs. Other times it can be trying to sneak out of the residence so they can go out and visit their friends outside, or sometimes it's trying to get their friends from outside inside to visit them. Of course, it's all against the rules and people have agreed what the rules are and signed a contract, but not everybody listens to those. Well, is willing, even though they signed the contract, they're not willing to follow those rules. Now, the danger here is in stereotyping, because sometimes we'll say, oh, those students, they're so bad. But it's not true. It's only like 5% of the students are so bad. But this is often how stereotypes are formed. It's not the average of what everybody's doing, which is pretty good. It's, oh, this one little group is doing something, and therefore the rest of them must be like that too. Okay? So it's important for me to remember that, you know, it's really only a small group that causes trouble. The rest are actually having reasonable behavior and learning useful stuff as well. I mean, the point of the residential stay is you learn to deal, you know, with people you don't know so well, which is basically what TNS is all about. So when I discipline, I have to be careful not to over-discipline because you don't necessarily want to kill some people, but at the same time, you have to let them know that, you know, the safety of the other people in the building is very important. So in that sense, in the long run, it benefits both, again, the students and myself. Because I become a better person by realizing that sometimes still I unconsciously form those stereotypes, and I better not do that. If I really want to deal well with the situation, you have to truly understand it. And in terms of motivating people, again, it's always good, whether it's my children or students or my colleagues, we have to be able to motivate each other as well as others. Okay, so that's the end of my reflection. Now, just a few side points about the reflection. I have my notes in front of me here, and you can see I'm looking down at them sometimes. If you want to, feel free to do that. You can always pause the recording and go think about what you're going to say, but take your time, say it properly. This is actually my second recording. The first one just was a lot longer because I added a lot more detail, which you didn't really need. So this one took about 8 minutes, so I figure 8 minutes is what you can do yours in. Okay, if you have any questions, please ask your tutors. Good luck.